Can Trump replace J.D. Vance? He can and he should, before it's too late. Vance not only has a net favorable rating of -6, but he's also one of the most disliked vice presidential candidates in decades. For a little context, let's consider some of the Republican Party's other unpopular VP choices. Dan Quayle exited the Republican convention with a positive 15-point net favorability rating. Let's not forget the disaster that was Sarah Palin, but even she managed to enjoy a positive 26-point net favorability rating after the convention. But see, it gets even worse for Vance. In his home state of Ohio, he's polling at -16 net favorability. Now, it's one thing if the country doesn't like you, but your own home state, the state that elected you as their senator less than 2 years ago, is already over you. But that would assume that Ohioans were ever really into J.D. Vance in the first place. Check out what CNN senior data reporter Harry Enton had to say about J.D. Vance's unpopularity.
I will tell you, Aaron, I have gone all the way back since 1980. He is the first guy after immediately following a convention, a VP pick, who actually had a net negative favorable rating. That is underwater. The average since 2000 is plus 19 points. J.D. Vance making history in the completely wrong way. But if you look at Ohio, J.D. Vance won in 2022, but he only won by 6 points. That's worse than Donald Trump did in 2020. It's far worse than Mike DeWine did in 2022. He was the worst performing Republican candidate in 2022 up and down the ballot in the state of Ohio. He had nothing there.
A VP pick may not boost the ticket, but historically, it shouldn't hurt it either. At least not this soon. If you're less than 3 weeks post-convention, you shouldn't be able to Google search, "Can Trump dump Vance?" and get results. Yeah, quite a few of them. You should give it a try. And it's not good for President Trump to already be proclaiming that the vice presidential role doesn't matter that much. But back to the opening question. Can Trump replace J.D. Vance? Yes, a resounding yes. And it's actually happened before, to the Democrats back in 1972. Presidential nominee George McGovern selected Senator Thomas Eagleton as his running mate, but he didn't put much thought into the decision. You see, McGovern had been turned down by 5 or 6 people for the VP spot. He'd originally hoped that Senator Ted Kennedy would be his running mate, but that never happened. After getting turned down over and over, he had to make a decision. It was the first day of the convention, and after a lot of campaign chaos, and just an hour before the deadline, McGovern picked Senator Thomas Eagleton. They spoke on the phone for only 2 minutes. At that time, vetting a VP candidate wasn't standard practice. And boy, that was a mistake that was learned the hard way. Rumors began to swirl shortly after he became the vice presidential candidate. Then, an anonymous call phoned McGovern's headquarters and said, "Check into Senator Eagleton's background. He has a complicated medical background." It was quickly uncovered that Senator Eagleton had checked into a hospital on 3 different occasions to get treated for depression. On 2 of those occasions, he underwent electroshock therapy. Initially, McGovern acted like he wasn't deterred by these mental health issues and stood by Eagleton. At one stop, McGovern said, quote, "It's hot here tonight, but I'll tell you one thing, I can take the heat and I'm going to stay in the kitchen." On another occasion, McGovern said, "I'm behind him 1,000%. He then turned around, went behind closed doors, and ordered that Eagleton be dropped from the ticket after just 18 days. So when Trump gets out there and skips past the, J.D. Vance's great part, straight to the vice presidential role doesn't matter, like this?
Historically, the vice president, in terms of the election, does not have any impact. I mean, virtually no impact. You have 2 or 3 days where there's a lot of commotion as to who, like you're having it on the Democrat side, who it's going to be. And then that dies down, and it's all about the presidential pick.
Who's he trying to convince? Himself? Is that some sort of self-soothing statement that makes him feel good, warms the cockles of his heart when he goes to bed at night, that the guy that he picked that's a complete disaster won't matter? So yes, Trump is allowed to can his vice president and replace him. But every hour that passes, it gets harder and harder to do this. Ballots have to be printed up, and each state sets its own deadlines for doing so. Take, for example, the state of Pennsylvania. The earliest day that you can vote as a constituent is September 16th. That's less than a month and a half away, as Johnny Cash would say. Time's a-wasting. But things get a little more complicated in states like Arizona. The latest a new presidential candidate can be added is August 30th. But the state's counties vary. For example, Maricopa County in Arizona says it needs ballots to be finalized by August 22nd. That's only a few weeks away. Then in J.D. Vance's home state of Ohio, the deadline to get on the ballot is August 7th, and that's in 3 days. Bottom line, Trump can get rid of Vance. Then the RNC would pick a replacement. If they want to get the vice president's name on the ballot with Trump, that would need to be done in a few days. If things progress past ballot printing deadlines, I gather that then Trump voters are merely voting for a ticket with the VP to be determined by the Republican Party. Now, this all seems wild, but it has already been a crazy election year. We watched Biden space out on live TV. Then Biden dropped out. Then Kamala was anointed the candidate. Then Trump survived an assassination attempt. And it's only August. With just 92 days till the election, anything can happen. A vice president getting replaced wouldn't really shock me. Maybe we'd get a new political term out of it to add to the lexicon. Back in 1987, President Reagan nominated Robert Bork for the Supreme Court. After he was tore apart in confirmation hearings, he was ultimately rejected. Since then, people have referred to a political rejection as getting borked. Even the Oxford English Dictionary added the term to their list, saying that bork is a verb used as slang to defame or vilify a person systematically, especially in the mass media, usually with the aim of preventing his or her appointment to public office. Maybe if Trump dumps his vice president, we can now call it getting vanced. So why is it that so many people don't like J.D. Vance? Well, I can tell you why I don't like him. Vance isn't the best choice by a long shot. He's just the guy that had the most money behind him, and let's face it, most Republicans weren't going to vote for a Democrat in 2022 for the senator of Ohio, especially when that Democrat is Tim Ryan. And there's no way MAGA is going to go for Tim Ryan. So for better or worse, conservatives voted for Vance 2 years ago. But being the lesser of two evils isn't something that is necessarily going to make you loved by your constituents in just a few years. He's not even done anything during his short time in Congress that is memorable. I know, I'm a lifelong Ohioan. Just like Vance, I grew up here. My formative years were spent in the Buckeye State. I also attended OSU, just like Vance. And this podcast is being broadcast to you from a small rural town in Ohio, the kind that Vance likes to say that he's from. But the more than $2 million mansion he's loafing in Cincinnati is a far cry from the working class community and the struggle bus lifestyle he sold to Americans in his best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy. In fact, J.D. Vance doesn't really have that much of a resume. His whole career was boosted by tech billionaire Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel basically got J.D. Vance every job he's ever had and pulled strings to get him employed. He's never really had to earn anything. I don't see J.D. Vance out there writing cover letters and applying for jobs on Indeed or Monster.com. This man had his life completely laid out for him and was cherry-picked by Peter Thiel. So he can tell me he grew up poor, but his life as an adult has been nothing but a gravy train. But this isn't the only thing, sure. Rich people pick out people to endorse as candidates and boost them up. Sure, Peter Thiel gave J.D. Vance $15 million 2 years ago for his Senate race, but money is a thing in politics. Let's move past it. But it's J.D. Vance's massive flip-flop on Trump that really ticks me off. It's a reversal which conveniently came at the time he wanted to run for U.S. Senate in Trump country of Ohio. Vance has called Trump a sociopath, a liar, America's Hitler, a racist, an idiot, and even publicly posted that Trump is a rapist. But once people think you're a flip-flopper, it's hard to recover from. Do you remember John Kerry? He was branded a flip-flopper, and it cost him the election in 2004. Let's not forget Vance's comments calling the childless sociopathic and deranged. Vance even said we should declare a war on people with anti-child ideology. He's advocated for making the childless pay more in taxes and stated that childless people running the government aren't as good because they don't have a stake in the future. What else does he want to do? Well, he wants the childless to not have as many votes in the system. That's right. If you have a kid, you get an extra vote. Vance has also stated that women should stay in abusive marriages because they aren't that bad and suggested that women's travel should be restricted to ensure they aren't having an abortion in another state. But it's his line about American cities being run by childless cat ladies that is probably the most damning comment he's made so far. It's been memified online. You can't really recover from that. It's so pointed, so hateful, so dismissive. It's so misogynistic on its face, it's hard to believe a man would say that out loud in the 21st century. And this comment is just a few years old, so he can't say he was just young and dumb with his words. I mean, he was a best-selling author after all. So was all this worthy of dismissing Vance? Well, this childless cat lady says so. You see, I'm not alone. There are more than 21 million childless women in the United States from the age of 20 to 39. You see, a record number of women are choosing to not have kids, and J.D. Vance just pissed them all off. We may not have kids, but we are registered to vote, and we tend to lean blue. If you zoom out and look at just single women, the number is double, standing at 42 million single women in this country. That voting bloc is nearly as large as that of African Americans. Besides, it doesn't take a political scientist for people to know that the GOP has long had a woman problem. The reputation for being sexist and misogynistic is thick. The overturning of abortion is already stimulating women to vote, and J.D. Vance's judgment on their lifestyle isn't helping smooth over this rough spot. For his own political aspiration, it was unbelievably dumb for Vance to chastise childless women. Don't anger such a large voting bloc. But it was even dumber for the Trump campaign to add J.D. Vance to the ticket. I mean, not only was he the original Mr. Trump derangement syndrome in walking, living, breathing color on television, but he's also this massive woman hater. Look, Trump already has his own issues with women. Why he picked someone with a more misogynistic reputation than him makes no sense at all. All I can come up with is Vance's political sugar daddy and tech giant Peter Thiel is what Trump really wanted. He just wanted him for his cash. But eyeing all of that green appears to have been a mistake that now has Trump seeing red. Trump hires awful people. He just has no instinct for it and buys into the ass-kissing. So apparently Trump didn't learn anything from his first administration. Messing up and hiring Reince Priebus or John Bolton is a mistake that you can recover from. And while replacing your vice president isn't actually that hard of a thing to do technically, it is horrible in terms of optics. But how long are they going to ride this sinking ship? We are 92 days out from the election, and every day we all know something's going to come up from Vance, or he's going to open his flapper and say something even dumber. This clip is from a podcast a few days ago where J.D. Vance is talking about the moment that Trump called him to say he was going to be his vice president. Listen to how he says he talked to his son.
So he's trying to talk to me about Pikachu. And I'm on the phone with Donald Trump. And I'm like, son, shut the hell up for 30 seconds about Pikachu.
Maybe Trump will lose, maybe Trump will win, and Vance will be the vice president. Who knows? But either way, I know that whenever Vance's name is brought up, me and many other Americans will be able to clearly say,
I never liked him. I never liked him.
Thanks for listening to Overnight Opinions. Be sure to tune in next Sunday night for an all-new episode. In the meantime, be sure to follow the Ladies Love Politics channel on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.